Okay, I've owned this car for 3 years now, basically, and done 48,000 kilometers. Thought it would be a good time to do a long-term review. So we're talking my Mitsubishi Outlander Aspire Edition, kind of considered the sweet spot in the PHEV range. Pretty much has all of the mod cons you would want without the luxuries that you don't necessarily need, and things like a sunroof here in WA. I mean, it's 38 degrees today, so it's not something you're going to use that often here. You're really going to batten down the hatches and have your air conditioning anyway. I digress. Long story short, for my use case, this car has been absolutely brilliant. Best car I've owned. I bought it pretty much on spec after seeing all the specifications and the improvements they'd made over the previous generation, which I had been considering at the time when I was looking for a new car. When I saw the stats for this one, I held off because leaps and bounds ahead of the older generation with regard to power, torque, EV range, that sort of thing. A little bit larger as well, which I didn't think I would fill up, but I have. I bought this car for my use case because as a photographer, I use it for work during the week, for carting gear around, getting to places obviously, and most of them are fairly localized, so my day-to-day running costs for work almost zero. Charge on solar at home. Most of my work hours is outside of most people's normal working hours, so I'm at home a lot of the time with the car on charge with solar. So that works brilliantly. I also use it for road trips and camping, and my use case for camping is very specific in that I do landscape astrophotography, or astro landscapes, whatever you want to call it. And it usually means having to take off at fairly short notice with weather windows. You usually shoot the Milky Way, so clear skies, appropriate moon, all that kind of thing. So I wanted something I could keep ready to go camping in and just throw in my camera gear and away I go. So things like the 240 volt AC power built into this car was an absolute game changer for that kind of thing. I'll be going through in a separate video my camping setup, which will go into the 240 volt appliances I use, because they're so much better, so much more effective, and so much cheaper than 12 volt camping gear, and don't want to touch gas. Now, for that purpose, the car's got enough room for me to sleep in the back. Takes all my gear. I probably have this car heavier than it should be, but she's not sagging on the springs or causing any other problems like that. On the open road, she's a beautiful drive, very smooth. It's basically a full EV driving experience. It's one of the reasons I also went for the Outlander PHEV is because it is an EV drivetrain that just happens to have an ICE that can engage the wheels when it's efficient for it to do so, like right now, because we're cruising at a constant speed. I got used to the EV driving experience and could not go back to an ICE type drivetrain. So the driving experience is smooth, it's powerful, it's comfortable, it's seamless, and it's also surprisingly effective off-road. You've got a low-speed crawling ability in this car that a lot of soft-roaders don't have, and you've got all that torque from zero. Now, I've seen discussions about direct drive EV drivetrains and their suitability for heavy use four-wheel drives. Now, this is not a heavy use four-wheel drive. It's a soft-roader. And in that application, it is superior to all the other soft-roaded four-wheel drive drivetrains. Independent motors, front and rear, all that torque from a very low speed. You can crawl over obstacles, so you minimize risking damage to your vehicle. When you hit soft sand, you almost don't notice it. In fact, it can be deceptive. When you're driving an ICE four-wheel drive, when you hit soft sand, you feel the engine labour. You've got to get the revs back up. Sometimes you've got to change gears, drop down a gear. In this car, you don't realise how soft the sand is until you get out of the car or look out the window, or sort of you end up bellied out on something on a high centred because you've driven through some deep ruts. It just doesn't seem to notice. It's kind of effortless. On the road, it handles beautifully for a big, heavy car. And the thing that I don't see mentioned that much is the super all-wheel control system, which sounds like a gimmick on paper, but when you drive this car, I know some reviewers have complained about the steering being a little bit too light, and the reason for that at speed is when you turn into a corner or you need to tighten up in a corner, the super all-wheel control system, because it's channeling torque and braking certain wheels, it's actually helping you steer through the corner with your braking system and with the torque delivery. So it takes the load off the actual steering inputs. So it's not that the power steering is light, it's just that the steering loads are being reduced by the super all-wheel control. And it means you can come into corners thinking you're going a little bit too hot, and it gets through there without suffering too much understeer when you're actually fully expecting it for a car like this. So not a gimmicky system at all, works particularly well with the PHEV drivetrain with that torque delivery. Very, very effective and really reassuring on long trips, and makes them a lot more enjoyable as well. You have plenty of power for overtaking. Again, I've heard some people criticise, saying, oh, overtaking manoeuvres, you know, once you get up to a certain speed, or it's not so great at higher speeds. I think in most of those cases, the reviewers were probably sitting on a very low charge of battery, state of charge, and possibly in the wrong drive mode. Because basically for a long trip, you want to maintain at least a half charge on the battery. Basically because the car's getting half of its power from the battery and the other half from the ICE generator when it's calling on full power. And as you might know, the state of charge of a battery also quite often controls how much charge it can output at maximum draw. So a lower state of charge, it's going to be able to discharge less amps into the system. So the ICE can only contribute so much generation power, and it's relying on the battery to provide the rest to get the full 185 kilowatts. So you want to have at least a half a charge in your battery. When you're coming up to do an overtaking manoeuvre where it's a fairly crucial one, like you're going to be on the wrong side of the road for a time, make sure you're in normal mode. Sorry, not normal mode. Make sure you're in normal drive mode. Not drive mode. Now, let's try that again. Make sure that you are in tarmac, in the drive mode, and for the EV mode, in normal mode. That way, the car knows it can provide full power from the battery, full power from the ICE. Once you've done your overtaking, you can switch back into whatever drive mode you were comfortable cruising at. That's my tip for overtaking, and it's got oodles of power for that if you do it that way. Might seem a little bit fiddly, but it's part of what makes this car kind of a geek's dream. You can tweak the settings to suit how you want to drive it rather than it doing it all for you. Now, like I said, around town, really efficient, it's great. You just plug it in, charge every day. After 3 years and 48,000 kilometres, I have not noticed any battery degradation whatsoever. I've seen no reduction in my EV driving range. My driving style has always had me at about 60 k's guessometer, and it's still on that. So that hasn't changed at all. The dashboard and systems, I think, work really well. It's not the flashiest screen, it's not the biggest screen, does what it needs to do. The physical buttons are great, and the physical dials for scrolling through things on the touchscreen. Obviously, when you're driving like now, you've got bumpy roads. Trying to actually carefully select something on a touchscreen is a nightmare. So having access to these physical buttons and also for the climate controls is great. Could it be prettier and more modern looking? Sure. But I think as far as a compromise for a practical vehicle, it works really well, especially with the upgraded digital display in the dash. The heads-up display is brilliant. Also no complaints there. If I have any complaints or things that I would prefer to be a little bit different, number one would be a camping mode. It's kind of frustrating having to put the car into ready and have the DRLs come on and it making a noise when you're trying to camp quietly and discreetly somewhere. You don't want to disturb other campers, or you might not want other people to know you were there, especially when you're by yourself. So having a dedicated camp mode where you could energize the drive battery to access things like climate control and your AC power would be great. Don't know if that'll ever happen. It's a Japanese company. Japanese companies don't ever like to admit they've made a mistake. So why would they fix it if they didn't make a mistake? That's one. This is the first generation of this generation, and there is a little bit of bump steer at the rear. It can get a little unsettled if you hit a bump mid-corner. It's really only a tiny movement and it recovers almost straight away, so it's not a safety issue or anything else. It's just a sense of it being a little bit squirrely. Plus I've got a fair amount of weight in the back, which probably reduces that. And thirdly, the paint will chip if you look at it funny. It's a really, really poor paint job, unfortunately. Really thin, not very robust. I'm glad I just got the basic plain white. I would have hated to have paid extra for a different color. I only have to get a touch-up paint that perfectly matches, because I do find little marks come up fairly easily. Fortunately, a lot of the panels are plastic, which helps. I don't find the bonnet wobble too much of a problem. It does that mainly because it's an aluminium bonnet, so it's to save weight. It's not a scary thing. So all in all, I have no genuine complaints about this car. Efficiency. We'll get into efficiency. It is not the most efficient plug-in hybrid out there. We'll get that out of the way. But it's not the way this drivetrain has been designed. Because it doesn't have a CVT or an auto gearbox or anything else, and it is EV biased, the motor only engages at a single speed. So the efficiency is going to be compromised by that, the actual fuel economy. But it gives you a better driving experience. Second to that, it makes the system more reliable and simpler. Despite the complexity of all the drive modes, it's actually a fairly simple drivetrain with fewer moving components in it. And it also allows for maximum flexibility in the use cases for this car. Like I said, I do take on sandy tracks to get to places for camping and some rough tracks. This car, it's no bush basher, but this car has probably seen more dirt than 90% of lifted four-wheel drives on the road. You're not going to take it to Cape York, up the telly, or anything like that. It is a soft roader. Ground clearance is your main limitation. Traction is not. Power is not. So driven sensibly, this will get you a surprising amount of places. And you're spending most of your time on bitumen anyway to get to these places. So to have a built-up four-wheel drive built up to tackle the toughest trails. They're an absolute dog to drive on road, and in my opinion, unsafe as well. So all in all, anyone thinking about buying one of these, I haven't driven the C-Line 6 or CL6, can't remember which one, the BYD, so, which is kind of a version of this, very similar drivetrain. I do believe this would have better driving dynamics and a well-sorted chassis. Obviously, the BYD, you've got a bit more power, although on paper it doesn't seem to be that much quicker, or in real life it doesn't seem to be that much quicker. And obviously you've got a lot more tech inside the BYD, but at the time this was the only one on the market in this form. The BYDs came later, so I have no regrets, and I'd still be tempted to look at this over a BYD now, even though there's a price premium. You've got a car built in Japan, you've got a very tried and tested drivetrain. They've been running this same engine in various iterations for a long time now, and they've ironed out a whole heap of problems. There seems to be zero reliability issues with these engines. It does the job, it's a workhorse, it'll just keep going indefinitely. Any complaints of the older generations, the engine's not one of them. So I think this car has a lot going for it still, despite the competition. Now, I guess it's only fair, since I shared briefly the cons, or the things that I wish were different about this car, I'll share some of the highlights in my mind. Already mentioned the off-road ability, surprisingly capable, considering I'm on the 20-inch wheels and the low-profile tyres. Yeah, covered that. Other things, adaptive cruise control. I know that's fairly common these days, but it works really well with the radar. Game changer for me with all these long drives now. Just makes you drive much more patiently and a lot less frustration. Other thing, even though I don't do a huge amount of country driving at night, is the adaptive high beams. They work brilliantly, not just for oncoming traffic, but also for those street signs on the side of the road. Not street signs, but traffic warning signs, like this one coming up here. That when you've got your lights on high beam, these things just blind you as you get close to them. The adaptive high beam dips the light down on that side and gets rid of that problem as well. So that's an unexpected side benefit from that. Air conditioning is great. Obviously it's got a pretty extensive cooling system since it's doing the battery as well, so it never seems to struggle. The stereo, the sound system, this is the bass sound system in the range, it's not the Bose, and from all I've heard, I'm glad I haven't got the Bose. But yeah, everyone's got their own thoughts and feelings about Bose. I'm glad they've moved the premium models now into a Yamaha sound system. By all accounts is fantastic. I'd have a lot more confidence in a Yamaha system than a Bose one. Let's put it that way. But for the standard system, it's really good. It's obviously at my age, I'm approaching 60, so high frequencies, I'm probably not the best judge. But it has really good dynamics. Really nice mid-range. It doesn't have conventional tweeters as such, I've noticed. It seems to be using a mid to high driver up on the windscreen and a low-range driver in the doors. And obviously for my old ears, that's probably perfect. Some can sound harsh and brittle, I think, because it sounds hi-fi, but I like the sound of this system a lot. I store most of my music on a USB. I play it off that because I usually get hold of FLAC files, high-resolution files, and it plays them all, no problems at all. All in all, great. I don't use Android Auto that much, basically because it's wired. I don't mind the navigation too much. It's nice that it comes up on the heads-up display, whereas your Google nav doesn't. I use it around town sometimes when I've got to find somewhere in a newer suburb, or I feel like I'm getting a bum steer from the built-in system, even though I do update the maps regularly. That's all I can say about that. Yes, and the open road driving characteristics, just a really comfortable, easy, smooth car to drive that you can also have a bit of fun with. So that's about it. Hopefully people will find this useful if they're contemplating getting one of these or weighing up the options, even looking at one second hand now. Like I say, I've had no battery degradation that's noticeable. I haven't had any problems with the car whatsoever. The only thing I needed to call Mitsubishi roadside service was for a big hole in a tyre that I couldn't fix with my tyre plugs, which I keep with me, and a decent compressor. It was just too big a hole. I've since acquired a spare tyre that I can put on the roof if I'm travelling more remotely. And Mitsubishi roadside service was great. I was about 150 k's out of Perth, and they arranged someone to come and pick us up, flatbed truck, took it to the nearest dealer, which was fairly close to home, and that was great. So no complaints there either.